Where is the $500,000? That is the question hitting headlines and causing shockwaves in the sister wives community. For years, viewers have seen the Browns' drama play out on television, quarrels about property, money, and family order. But nothing could have prepared people for this revelation. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation, as the judge demanded answers that Robyn simply could not provide. We have seen Robyn play the dutiful wife, the mediator, the one who quietly upheld the family's fragile financial balance. But behind closed doors, according to court documents and insider reports, a massive withdrawal appeared from the family accounts, $500,000, without clear explanation. This is not just a fiscal discrepancy. This is a tale of responsibility, deceit, and the disintegration of a well-orchestrated illusion. Tonight, we're going to break down this case in step-by-step detail, what transpired, how it was discovered, the legalities involved, and the astonishing responses from the family and the court. The evidence is being analyzed live, and the repercussions might change everything viewers believed they knew about the Browns. But first, just take a moment and subscribe to the channel. Press the notification bell. You do not want to miss one surprise as this saga is still unfolding. Each leak, each document, each moment of courtroom drama will be dissected for you here first. Meanwhile, let's get to the core of the issue. The $500,000 withdrawal did not appear out of thin air. It came as part of a thorough audit initiated by Christine and Janelle's attorneys. As far as sources of the proceedings are concerned, the audit was initially routine, a part of a larger review of the family's business transactions and assets. However, when the forensic accountants started investigating, something glaring became apparent. Transactions purported to be routine reimbursement expenses or business-related did not correlate with any invoices, receipts, or approvals. The most frightening item: one large withdrawal of $500,000. And under cross-examination in court, Robyn could not give a clear answer. Several attempts at explaining the source, function, and destination of these monies were met with reluctance, evasiveness, and in some cases, silence. The judge, an old hand at intricate family financial matters, leaned forward. "Describe this withdrawal, Miss Brown." The words sliced through the room like a gavel. "Where did the $500,000 go?" Robyn, for the first time under oath, didn't know. This was more than a procedural glitch. The court understood that $500,000 is an extraordinary amount of money, one that could be used to finance several real estate investments, family businesses, or lifestyle choices. For a family already in the public eye over their in-show scandals and accusations of financial mismanagement, this news was a huge deal. Sources in the courtroom say the atmosphere was charged. You could sense the tension. Attorneys shuffled documents. Robyn shifted uncomfortably, and the judge's gaze appeared to cut through each try at evasion. This wasn't a numbers question. This was a question of trust, authority, and integrity of the family that millions of viewers had grown to care about. The tale of the $500,000 withdrawal starts not in court but behind the scenes, in the careful world of financial audits. When Christine and Janelle first questioned unexplained spending, it appeared normal, just another layer of vigilance for a high-profile family business. But as the forensic accountants dug through months of transactions, something odd started to emerge. Court filings state that the audit initially targeted routine business accounts, home expenses, property upkeep, and personal spending tied to the family's lifestyle. Every account was double-checked against receipts, bank statements, and internal approval. That is where the anomaly showed up, a withdrawal well above the expected amount, neatly rounded at $500,000. With no accompanying explanation or record of purpose. Accountants report feeling in shock upon discovering the discrepancy. In the majority of cases, missing or misspent funds are due to clerical mistakes, miscommunication, or delayed reporting. But this withdrawal was not one of them. It contained no supporting paperwork, no memo, no mention of contracts or legal purchases. It seemed like the money had disappeared into thin air. Armed with the audit report, Christine and Janelle's attorneys moved quickly. They submitted motions to have the family's financial records examined under court supervision, an unusual but not unheard of move in high-profile family conflicts. The judge, who was infamous for being frank and unyielding, issued swift orders for Robyn to detail the withdrawal. Courtroom insiders report the heir was charged when the hearing opened. Lawyers were poised, evidence had been carefully prepared, and the judge didn't hesitate to get to the point. "Miss Brown," the judge said directly to Robyn, "your family's financial affairs are before this court. Explain this $500,000 withdrawal and provide documentation for its use." Robyn, visibly tense, paused. The silence was heavy. Cameras capturing the proceedings captured her shifting in her seat, adjusting papers, clearly searching for words that did not come. Her inability to respond immediately hinted at the gravity of the situation. $500,000 is not just a number, it is a life-changing sum. In real terms, it might be used to pay for a mortgage, several luxury cars, or even a down payment on a mansion. For the court, however, the issue was straightforward. Was the withdrawal sanctioned? Was it for personal use, family affairs, or something else unsavory? Practitioners of family law who have been observing the case have noted that if a party is unable to explain away such an amount, courts take it extremely seriously. The opacity would be construed as a violation of fiduciary duty and quite possibly an instance of financial impropriety. The stakes were high. Robyn's failure to respond to the judge's question not only challenged her credibility, but also risked undermining the solidity of the family's financial reputation, both in and out of the show. As the gavel fell to reopen the hearing, the courtroom drew in around Robyn, all eyes upon her, every camera lens focused to record the slightest response. The judge, for whom reputation was sharp and unyielding, leaned across the desk, his eyes narrowing. "Miss Brown," he started, "the court demands a complete explanation of the $500,000 withdrawal. It is not a suggestion. It is an order." Robyn's mouth opened, hesitated, and then closed once more. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably, papers rustling in a futile attempt to provide backup. The silence that followed was deafening. In courtroom proceedings, moments like this are rare. A person's inability to answer a direct question in front of a judge often signals the beginning of legal consequences. Robyn's defense team scrambled. They tried to inject context, arguments about normal transfers, murky accounting, or timing delays in accounting entries, but the judge cut them off at every turn. "Generalities are not enough," he snapped. "We require specifics. Where did the money go? For what purpose was it spent? Show us receipts, contracts, or any document substantiating this withdrawal." The lawyer's voice remained steady, but their posture reflected a sense of tension. Witnesses in comparable cases have said that once a judge perceives evasiveness, the court is less tolerant, and the burden of proof shifts substantially to the party under examination. In this instance, that meant Robyn's efforts at answering were piecemeal. She spoke vaguely of family expenditures, of business requirements, of miscellaneous payments. But each mention was without supporting evidence. The judge's eyes narrowed, as if she was reading the room not only for facts, but for truth. Inside observers noted that she was clearly agitated, talking about shifting papers, drumming her fingers, and sometimes looking to her lawyer for direction. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. It was apparent to all who were present that this was not an ordinary finance dispute. This was a battle of accountability, transparency, and honesty. The $500,000 was not a figure on a balance sheet. To the family, it was trust, authority, and reputation. The public and legal attention meant that the way Robyn reacted could establish the tone for the rest of the trial. In a court of law, not explaining herself might result in fines, compelled repayment, or even charges of fiscal impropriety. At this point, Robyn's silence was deafening. The judge's ultimatum rang out in the courtroom. An unexplained cash withdrawal of $500,000 could not be dismissed, and she stood under the umbrella of responsibility. Courtroom tension thickened as the judge geared up to probe deeper. "Miss Brown," he told her, "we will take it step by step, begin from the date of withdrawal and go on at length." Robyn's hands shook slightly as she parted her lips again. She hesitated, looking for words, but the silence was oppressive, almost smothering. In the gallery, the family looked at each other, Christine's eyes alert, Janelle's jaw clenched. Both had criticized Kody and Robyn's monetary handling, and now this $500,000 question put Robyn squarely in the limelight. Court observers commented on how the presence of family members may affect testimony. Christine sat forward, conferring in hushed tones with her lawyer, eyes locked on Robyn. Janelle fidgeted with her chair, clearly bracing for each fresh piece of news. The drama wasn't about cash. It was about responsibility, integrity, and family trust breakdown. After going through the public eye already, the tone of the judge continued to be measured but unyielding. This court is not interested in supposition or generalities. We need a factual explanation of the $500,000. You will suffer penalties if you do not supply one. Robyn's lawyer stood up, trying to guide the story. Your Honor, my client is ready to present financial reports. Statements are not satisfactory, the judge cut in. We need a clear-cut explanation. Who got the money? To what end? When were these payments made? We are not sitting here to consider general accounts. We are sitting here to investigate individual transactions. The face of the attorney reflected discomfort. It was obvious that the judge's patience was thinning. The onus was now firmly on Robyn media crews set up outside the courtroom to cover every twist. Social media was abuzz with rumor, screenshots, and clips of the hearing. Soon, headlines would be screaming about the withdrawal of $500,000, pouring fuel on the glare. For a reality television show Family Star, these are not merely legal moments. They are narrative moments that form public opinion. Amongst it all, Robyn's apprehension was evident. Perspiration dotted her forehead. Her fingers tapped impatiently against the table. Every silence seemed to last an eternity as the courtroom held its breath for a response that still didn't materialize. The judge leaned forward, his eyes on Robyn. Miss Brown, let's begin with the transaction itself. Who signed off on the withdrawal? Robyn swallowed. I signed off on it, she whispered, her voice still just above a whisper. Signed off on it. The judge repeated, his voice biting. And yet your records indicate no supporting invoices or paperwork. What explanation is there for the discrepancy? Robyn's attorney jumped in quickly. Your Honor, my client can put this into context. The money was. Context means nothing without detail. The judge cut in. We are not here for generalities. We are here to clarify a $500,000 withdrawal unexplained. Scene transition checks and balances in the courtroom. Court clerks presented sheaves of statements, each page highlighted with red comments. Each entry, each transfer, was scrutinized through a magnifying glass. The judge took up a sheet, drawing attention to a withdrawal marked miscellaneous. Miss Brown, he asked, how does a $500,000 withdrawal end up under miscellaneous? Who got this money? Robyn's gaze scanned the courtroom. She began to open her mouth, then closed it, and ultimately conceded, I don't have a specific name. A whisper circulated through the courtroom. The judge's face grew darker, and a stern, issued from the bench. Christine's face set, Janelle's hands gripped the frame of her chair. The gallery sat in stunned silence, aware that the story was about to change direction. Robyn, normally self-assured and poised, was now defending herself. The balance of credibility was tipping, and the public narrative, soon to hit social media, was tilting against her. The judge motioned to the financial analyst present in court. Mr. Green, review this withdrawal and explain if it aligns with normal accounting practices. Mr. Undefined Green adjusted his glasses, scanning the records. Undefined, Your Honor, a $500,000 withdrawal without clear documentation is highly irregular. Undefined, any auditor would flag this immediately. Precisely, the judge said. Undefined, irregular, and unaccounted. Miss Brown, your explanation, or lack thereof, raises serious concerns about intent and oversight. The courtroom went still as the judge reached for a separate folder with bold yellow tabs. Miss Brown, these records outline each transaction associated with the $500,000 withdrawal, he said, setting them down gently on the bench. I am looking for accurate answers. Who was the money given to, when, and why? Robyn's hands shook ever so slightly as she opened her notes, but the pages gave her little solace. Her gaze flicked to her lawyer, who shook his head mildly. Your Honor, my client, counsel. She speaks for herself. Let her speak, the judge interrupted sternly. Robyn breathed deeply, attempting to calm herself. I don't have a detailed list of each transfer. It was for. Multiple reasons, she stuttered. The judge's eyebrow shot up, his face unyielding. Multiple reasons is vague. It is not chump change, Miss Brown, and accountability is required by law. A vague statement will not do. The court clerk had just handed the judge a printout of internal memos and stamped bank approvals. The judge leaned forward, his finger on one particular note. It shows here that you signed off on the transfer in person on the 14th of March, and there is no follow-up documentation. Can you tell me about it? Robyn's voice trembled. I thought the money would be dispersed correctly by the accounts team. Thought? The judge's voice became sterner. Miss Brown, responsibility cannot be passed on by assumption. Being an account holder and a signatory, you are responsible for the accurate monitoring of all funds. A shiver passed through the gallery. The financial analyst, Mr. Green, nodded solemnly. Your Honor, in my expert opinion, any removal of this scale without explicit documentation would be a serious violation of fiduciary duty. Christine and Janelle looked at each other, their faces a blend of vindication and disbelief. The tension in the courtroom grew, so thick one could feel it even through the television monitors airing the trial. The judge leaned back, interlacing fingers. Miss Brown, the onus is on you. You have to offer explainable reasons or suffer the repercussions of this unaccounted $500,000 withdrawal. The law frowns on uncertainty in financial transactions of such magnitude. Robyn's fingers curled around the table's edge, knuckles turning white. The presence of the courtroom weighed heavily upon her. Every passing second without an explainable answer widened the divide between her and believability. The judge rapped his gavel softly, calling forward the clerk. Call the next witness. Standing in the back of the courtroom was a tall, gray suit man who came to stand in front of the witness chair. He was composed, even sedate compared to the turbulence that had formed around Robyn. The bailiff administered his oath, and he said, Daniel Harris, Senior Investigator for the State Financial Crimes Division. There were faint gasps of shock from the back of the court. Christine's eyes went wide. Even Janelle leaned forward. This was no ordinary expert. This was an investigator with authority. Someone who had been digging beneath the surface long before today. The judge nodded. Mr. Harris, present your findings regarding the $500,000 withdrawal. The investigator adjusted his tie and pulled a folder from his briefcase. Your Honor, after a thorough review of the Browns' financial accounts, we discovered a series of transfers directly linked to Miss Brown. The trail goes to accounts that look like they are private, established outside of the family trust. Robyn's mouth dropped open, her lips apart in shock. She muttered something to her attorney, who wrote a furious scrawl on a pad of paper. Mr. Harris went on. The accounts had 3 large deposits made to them in the same week. The timing fits exactly with the $500,000 withdrawal. The judge leaned forward. Are you alleging Miss Brown steered family money into personal accounts? The tone of the investigator remained even. Yes, the records indicate money was not paid out for family expenditures, but rather siphoned into accounts held in Miss Brown's name with discretionary disbursements to unnamed individuals. A commotion swept through the courtroom. Journalists wrote more quickly, the sound of keyboard keys from live bloggers increasing as the shock broke. Robyn shook her head violently. Not true. Those accounts. Those were temporary placeholders to cover the money until it was spent on bigger expenses. The judge's tone was pinched. Do you have receipts or contracts as evidence of these bigger expenses? Robyn's pause replied for her. Christine leaned forward over to Janelle, her voice barely loud enough for microphones to pick up. She can't account for it because she never intended to. The judge faced the witness again. Mr. Harris, are those accounts still open? Yes, Your Honor. And the worst part, withdrawals were made even during this court inquiry. The courtroom was in an uproar. The judge pounded the gavel down. Order, he shouted. It was at that moment that the enormity of the evidence battered through Robyn's defenses. The withdrawal wasn't a secret anymore. It was a possible crime unfolding in the moment. Robyn's attorney stood up, papers fluttering in his hands like a crazed beat. Your Honor, if I might, this withdrawal was a miscommunication. There is paperwork outstanding that will completely clarify the circumstances. The judge held up a hand. Mr. Anderson, this court has been patient. The withdrawal took place more than 3 weeks ago. You are talking about proof, but you haven't brought it forward. Why must we keep holding up justice? Robyn leaned forward in her chair, her hands clenching the edge of the table. Her face showed panic. She leaned in to whisper to her lawyer. "We have something, we just need more time." Mr. Anderson's voice was breaking slightly under the tension. "We're in the midst of authenticating the transactions. There were several accounts, Your Honor, and the funds were for legitimate family investments." The judge's eyes snapped. "Legitimate?" Mr. Harris took the stand and said that money was diverted into personal accounts with withdrawals to unknown recipients. "How do you answer that?" Robyn's mouth opened, but no words emerged. For the first time in this trial, the confident veneer she had erected succumbed to the pressure of questioning. The gallery gasped. Reporters froze in the middle of typing, as a sense of tension descended into the room like a storm cloud. All eyes were upon Robyn, who didn't have an instant reply. Christine and Janelle shared a look. Each was aware that one wrong move here could decide the fate of not just the financial war but the emotional war years in the making. The judge rapped the gavel once smartly. "Miss Brown, this court requires an explanation, a clear, logical, and verifiable explanation. Can you give one now?" Robyn swallowed hard. Her lips trembled. She looked at the lawyer, and he gave a slight nod. But it brought no reassurance. No concrete evidence was readily available. No files prepared to save the story. I, Your Honor," she faltered. "The withdrawals were for domestic management and planning ahead." The judge's eyes bore into her. Domestic management. $500,000, Miss Brown. That is a considerable amount to withdraw without explanation. The court demands specifics, not general explanations. A faint hum of voices filled the air. Cameras zoomed in tightly, catching the tension etched in Robyn's eyes. The time had come when silence was more powerful than words. Mr. Anderson rummaged through papers nervously, muttering to Robyn, attempting to cobble together a defense the court would accept. But each step seemed to only lead to further scrutiny. The judge leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "Give me one more chance, Miss Brown. Produce your records, your receipts, or your rationale, or we go forward on the premise that this withdrawal is still unjustified and perhaps fraudulent." Robyn's heart thudded. The courtroom seemed smaller, the eyes upon her harder, and the truth, whatever it may be, hung like a firmly planted shadow over her next utterance. Robyn's fingers trembled as she stretched to grab a folder on the bench. The courtroom grew small around her, each eye fixed on her shaking body. The judge's eyes never wavered, as cutting as a knife, with a silent demand for openness. "Your Honor," Robyn hesitated, speaking in a voice little above a breath. I have statements and receipts. It is just, I need a minute to get them in order." The judge was not as patient as he appeared. "Miss Brown, this court has spent considerable time. A minute is not enough for thousands of dollars. Show what you have, here and now, or we go on the best evidence we have." Robyn's lawyer bent closer, mouthing quick encouragements. "You can do this. Just go step by step through the receipts." Robyn took a deep breath and opened the folder and started to work her way through the papers. The pages rustled, ringing out in the strained courtroom. Her explanation began slowly as she attempted to link the withdrawals to valid expenses. This amount was for electricity, medical bills, and household spending. And this was payment to a contractor for renovation. The judge's brow crinkled. "Miss Brown, these receipts are incomplete and broken. There is no chronology, no indication that these expenditures relate to the $500,000 in question." "What about the balance?" Robyn stumbled, her voice trembled. I didn't think the breakdowns would be enough. I didn't know the court would need an audit done right away." A whisper ran through the gallery. News reporters inched forward, sensing the drama mounting. Christine and Janelle held themselves stiffly, staring hard at Robyn. This was the moment that could unravel decades of personal and financial disagreements. The judge hunched forward, the gavel lying threateningly before him. "Miss Brown, we don't care what you thought would be enough. The court needs concrete evidence of how this $500,000 was managed. Your inability to come up with complete records is a cause for concern regarding intent and responsibility." Robyn's face went white. She riffled through the rest of the papers frantically, looking for something that could validate her assertion. Each page felt too little, each receipt too small to account for the huge withdrawal. Her attorney attempted to interrupt, proffering explanations, but the judge held up a hand. No interruptions. The court must have the explanation straight from Miss Brown's mouth. The court requires clarity, not hearsay. Robyn's throat constricted. The ensuing silence was dense, verging on deafening. The burden of scrutiny fell heavily, and her next words were of the utmost importance. Dayton at last spoke up, voice little more than a whisper. "Your Honor, I do not have an entire answer at this time." A solemn stillness descended over the courtroom. Cameras picked up every face. The judge's eyes narrowed, as if attempting to cut through the doubt and reach what lay beyond. "Not having an answer," he spoke deliberately, "is a severe issue. This court can construe that as a failure to properly account for money. The consequences are far-reaching." The mood in the courtroom was stifling. Each who attended felt the severity of it all. Robyn remained paralyzed, the words, "I do not have a complete answer," still ringing in the air. The judge's voice, calm but unwavering, left no room for misunderstanding. "This court takes financial transparency seriously," the judge continued, his eyes fixed on Robyn. "A withdrawal of $500,000 without proper documentation is not a trivial matter. You must understand that your lack of accountability could lead to serious legal consequences, including fines, asset seizure, or further court orders." Robyn swallowed hard. The weight of the ruling pressed on her chest. Her brain whirled, attempting to come up with explanations for the lost documentation. All of the excuses, all of the explanations she had mentally prepared, were not sufficient now. Christine and Janelle looked at each other, their faces a combination of vindication and wariness. They had lived for years on financial mismanagement and secrecy, and this moment was critical. The judge's focus was no longer simply on Robyn's words, but on the evidence, or lack thereof, supporting them. The judge sat in silence for a moment. "Miss Brown, this court demands better than partial answers. Money involved must be accounted for completely. If you can't deliver a complete and verifiable record, the court will hear alternative remedies such as a forensic audit and possible restitution to the affected parties." Robyn's attorney intervened, attempting to cool the judge's warnings. "Your Honor, we are willing to offer further documentation beyond today's session. We respectfully request a timeline in which to submit complete records." The judge looked at him for a long moment. "An extension of the submission date will be given, but keep in mind that this does not exempt Miss Brown from a scrutiny at once. The court demands total compliance. Undefended admission and delay will count against her in any verdict." Robyn felt the gaze of the courtroom bore into her. Undefendivery whisper. Every camera snap seemed to echo "Espa fail." Her pressure was intolerable. She had no real response for $500,000, and the seriousness of possible repercussions started to set in. The judge's gavel came down lightly, calling for a brief recess. "Undefined court will continue at 2 p.m. for consideration of additional documentation you present. Miss Brown, undefined makes sure the records are accurate and thorough. Undefinite the court expects nothing less." The courtroom began to clear, and Robyn sat silently, eyes fixed on the floor. Her thoughts rolled over each money decision, each untrod withdrawal. Unless the future was unclear, and the impending audit promised to reveal years of malfeasance. On the steps outside the courtroom, journalists massed, ready to report the incendiary news. Headlines were already being constructed in their minds. "Robyn fails to account for $500,000 withdrawal." For Robyn, recess was not respite, it was a countdown. A time bomb to create an answer that, to date, did not exist. When the court resumed, the mood was different. Robyn's efforts to get herself composed during recess had only served to heighten her anxiety. The judge's unyielding stare continued, a wordless warning that no explanation would do. "Miss Brown," the judge began, "documents you have submitted hitherto are incomplete. The court identifies inconsistencies that must be explained forthwith. We will now conduct an initial audit of the $500,000 withdrawal in question." A group of forensic accountants walked into the room, toting thick stacks of financial statements and laptops. Every step they took appeared to reverberate through the quiet courtroom, emphasizing the gravity of the proceeding. Cameras and notebooks trailed behind every step, recording the drama in progress for viewers and reporters outside. Robyn's lawyer tried to interject. Your Honor, we would like to take time to study these results prior to presenting them formally. The judge nodded his head gravely. Time has been allowed. The court anticipates cooperation and candor. Delays will not be tolerated. The auditors set to work, going through bank statements, withdrawal slips, and account books in a meticulous routine. Robyn's hands were moist, her heart racing. Each page that was turned seemed to bring to light the discrepancies in her explanations, the missing links in her trail of finances. Your Honor, said one of the auditors, there are a few transactions that cannot be explained. In particular, numerous withdrawals totaling $500,000 from joint and personal funds seem to have no documented purpose or recipient. There was a murmur of concern that went through the courtroom. Robyn's face turned white. She had reasoned that the first submission would be enough, but now the harsh reality of the audit laid bare the extent of the issue. Christine and Janelle observed closely, their faces a combination of satisfaction and vindication. Decades of supposed financial malfeasance were now out there, and this was their chance to make sure the responsible parties were held accountable. The judge leaned forward. Miss Brown, the court wants a complete explanation for every transaction. Gut statements, rumors, or poor records will not be tolerated. This is not a formality. It is a solemn examination of financial accountability. Robyn's mouth opened, but nothing emerged. She had prepared answers, excuses, and semi-answers, but the forensic examination left no margin for error. The auditors were meticulous, and the court's demands were unequivocal. As the session went on, Robyn understood the extent of the case. Every missing document, every vague transaction, raised the stakes on a harsh decision. The courtroom had turned from a forum for debate to a war zone where fiscal reality was required, and defeat was not allowed. Outside, reporters felt the drama playing out. Real-time coverage flowed across social media, heightening tension within. The world waited, and Robyn had no response. The courtroom was quiet as the auditors started announcing particular transactions linked to the $500,000 pull. Every number, every date, was like a spotlight on Robyn's financial gaps. Her lawyers fidgeted through papers, but the gravity of the evidence was undeniable. Miss Brown, the chief auditor, said, on the 14th of March, a withdrawal of $120,000 was taken from the joint account and paid to an unidentified recipient. There is no invoice, contract, or written explanation to back it up. Robyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her lips clamped together. She had practiced answers, but the auditor's careful bookkeeping caught her off guard. The judge leaned forward, voice steady but biting. Robyn, you must offer illumination. Your failure to account for these very large figures cannot be ignored. Christine sat in the front row, her hands folded with a calm face. Janelle's eyes did not waver, her gaze showing the justice she had pursued for months. The air was thick with tension. Another auditor added, on the 2nd of April, an independent withdrawal of $95,000 was made, again without the supporting documents. This is a pattern repeated over several months, accounting for the $500,000 at issue. The room sat in hushed silence, reporters scribbling notes and snapping reactions. Robyn's attorney tried to interrupt. Your Honor, we ask that the court receive an explanation on how the auditors came to this conclusion. The judge interrupted him curtly. This is not a debate. The auditor's report is a part of the official record, and Miss Brown must respond to every question directly. Robyn's hands shook. She made to speak, trying an explanation, but nothing articulate came out. Every effort dissolved into stammered phrases, and the judge's patience grew visibly thin. The auditor's next bombshell struck like a hammer. Furthermore, numerous funds have seemingly been diverted via secondary accounts, perhaps to obscure their final destination. This is seriously indicative of intent and transparency. There was a hush that descended upon the court. Robyn's mind was racing. The web of transactions that she had believed she could defend was now unraveling before everyone's eyes. It was no longer merely about missing cash. It was about credibility, trust, and legal responsibility. The judge's voice broke through the quiet, measured but firm. Miss Brown, you are going to have to give clear, factual answers for every one of these withdrawals. The court will not tolerate avoidance or vagueness. Your silence or refusal to answer could result in additional legal repercussions. Robyn swallowed hard. The awareness hit her. This was no longer a practice in defense. It was a day of reckoning, All the secret facts, all the minor transactions, were being scrutinized now. Outside, social feeds went haywire. Footage of the showdown spread quickly, every clip highlighting the tension, the questions left unanswered, and Robyn's inability to explain the $500,000 withdrawal. The courtroom had become a stage of revelation, and Robyn had no script to play. Just when it appeared Robyn would ride the storm of questions, the court clerk handed the judge a sealed envelope. The room leaned in collectively, the muted hum of expectation nearly palpable. The judge slowly opened it, reading through the contents with a piercing, intense stare. "Miss Brown," the judge started, voice level, but waited so as to demand notice. "The court has received further evidence regarding the $500,000 withdrawals. You will go through and interpret each of them at once." Robyn's eyes grew wide as the judge placed in her hands an extensive ledger, marked with transactions, dates, and recipients. Each deposit traced back to her, outlining a path of unexplained transfers that no one had ever reported before. The auditors were quick on the uptake. "Your Honor, they're transactions that seem to involve shell companies and offshore accounts. They were made over a period of months and reflect an intent to conceal both the source and destination of money." The gallery murmured low. The cameras of the press clicked in rapid succession, capturing Robyn's expression as the weight of the evidence came home to her. Her lawyers looked at each other, concern dawning on their faces their earlier confidence slipping away. "Robyn," the judge urged, "this is not a case of mere mismanagement or carelessness. These dealings indicate intent to hide, giving rise to grave doubts about compliance with duty and the law." Robyn's strong voice faltered as she attempted to speak. Me neither. There is surely a mistake." The judge's eyes did not flinch. "The court requires precision, not speculation. You are equally culpable for these withdrawals. Denial or speculation will not work." Christine and Janelle exchanged a small, knowing look. Months of waiting, of collecting evidence and recording discrepancies, had brought them to this point. They had anticipated this result, but the drama unfolding was more so than they had envisioned. The auditors went on to describe how the transactions led back to sundry personal accounts, such as credit cards and investment portfolios, all tending towards significant personal enrichment. With every revelation, the noose tightened around Robyn's answers. The courtroom seemed heavier, each sentence uttered resonating against the charged quiet. The judge's next words fell like a verdict before the verdict. "Miss Brown, the court will not hear evasions. You are directed to give full explanations for each transaction described in this ledger at the close of the hearing. Default will require the court to take further action, which may involve instant financial penalties and increased legal attention." Robyn's self-control started to crack, obviously. The ledger she held seemed to be a burden too great to carry. All eyes in the room were now upon her, expecting a defense that she was no longer able to provide. Amongst the crowd gathered outside the courthouse, social media and news channels were already reporting the stunning revelations. Headlines flashed with such statements as $500 K mystery deepens and Robyn on the hot seat. The tale was growing into a viral phenomenon and tension was building. The courtroom was electric, each person present holding his or her breath. Robyn sat transfixed, the ledger's weight trembling in her lap, her counsel furiously shuffling papers. The judge, unblinking and businesslike, adjusted his spectacles and stared straight at her. "Miss Brown," he started, voice measured, "after considering the evidence, the testimony, and the meticulous financial records, it is plain you have not given sufficient explanations for the $500,000 withdrawals. This court cannot ignore such irregularities." A murmur of shock swept through the gallery. Flashing cameras, more and more people were whispering. Even those who were used to high-stakes courtroom drama saw the gravity of the situation. The judge went on, his voice stern but not vengeful. "The court mandates that you pay back the entire sum of $500,000 to the proper accounts immediately. Additionally, as a result of the absence of transparency and the semblance of willful concealment, the court is levying further financial penalties." Robyn's eyes welled with alarm. I don't have the whole amount," she started, but the judge cut in harshly. "Your inability to account for the money cannot be used as an excuse. The onus is on you, Miss Brown. The court demands obedience without delay." Christine and Janelle shared a look of relief and vindication on their faces. Months of perseverance, careful documentation, and unshakable determination had led to this realization of justice. The judge hesitated, letting the gravity of his statement sink in before issuing the ultimate indelible statement. Let this be a stern reminder: fiscal responsibility and accountability are not negotiable. This court will not abide by negligence or avoidance, especially when such behavior impacts other people's livelihood and trust. When the gavel came down, the courtroom exploded in a combination of shock and applause. Robyn slumped in her chair, visibly defeated, the ledger now a testament to her inability to make her actions defensible. Outside, journalists snapped every possible angle. Headlines immediately started spreading online. Judge calls for Robyn to account for $500 K withdrawal phase she can't. And Robyn embarrassed in court over missing money. Social media erupted, with watchers analyzing every second, rescreening clips, and theorizing about the implications for Robyn's career. There were even the cynics among us who were questioning the extent of the financial scandal, who were compelled to recognize the magnitude of the expose. The backlash was instant. Financial audits, public scrutiny, and potential future legal action hung over them like a shadow. As the courtroom emptied, Christine and Janelle left together, their faces serene but determined. Justice, they understood, had ultimately been served, not through rumor, but through unflinching documentation, exact timing, and unrelenting pursuit of responsibility. For Robyn, uncertainty stretched out before her. Her ledger, the judge's decree, and the bright media glare would frame her story for months to come. One thing was certain in this courtroom: openness had prevailed and avoidance had been forcefully unmasked.